think you guys can hear me, but you can't see me yet. I haven't launched Zoom. But I believe I am streaming. I don't know, guys. I just rewatched. I was getting all those messages popping up. I didn't get all the way to the very end of the stream, but I was just rewatching the replay, and I didn't see any issues at all. It seemed smooth as butter from what I was seeing from the replay. So I'm just gonna, I don't know, maybe we're all having internet issues if you guys were saying you were lagging watching it live, because I didn't see any of that. But you know, we'll try it again. Hopefully it works this time. And if you guys want to call in, you know, go ahead and call in, because I'm about to launch into, where's my chat window? I'm about to launch into the Vases. You know, I've got a decent rant, I think. So, you know, if you want to call in, go ahead and call in. Get in before I start my rant. Yeah, I don't know. It seemed good. Like, it really looked perfectly fine when I watched the replay. So, someone mentioned there was a big solar flare. Doesn't surprise me. The solar flares have been nonstop. I didn't see anything about that one, but they've been nonstop. Why am I not? Did I not actually admit myself in here? There we go. You guys can't see me. Now you can see me. Okay. Let me go turn my light on. It's starting to get a little dark. So yeah, Michigan Relics real. There's 6,000 years that are just being overlooked by alternate historians and mainstream historians alike. And so I think that there's 6,000 years of discovery to be found still. You know, I think, like I said, Samaria didn't just pop up from nothing, but the idea that what's responsible for Samaria existed and was wiped out 6,000 years ago, and in between that was nothing, and then it's just a full relaunching, like, that doesn't add up to me. There's something being missed there, clearly, right? So the Vases are a good window into that, I think. And the Vases are one of the cases where they could be 12,000 years old. I really don't know how old they are. It's pretty well agreed that they're over 5,000 years old, like bare minimum 4,500 years. So where the Vases were found were underneath the bent pyramid. The step pyramid. The step pyramid, I feel like, gets the least attention of all of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. You have the Great Pyramid, obviously, number one. You know, it's a cool building. It's got some cool rooms inside of it, but nothing too crazy, nothing too exciting going on inside. You got some impressive chambers, maybe a new chamber to be discovered still right above the Grand Gallery. Similar kind of setup in the Red Pyramid. You've got granite casing blocks on that one, which is pretty cool. But otherwise, very similar setup internally. You got a couple impressive chambers, but nothing crazy going on. Same thing with the Bent Pyramid. A couple chambers inside, nothing crazy going on. Then you have the Step Pyramid, the earliest, the first one, the first pyramid, the oldest pyramid. And from the outside, it looks the least impressive. But then you go underneath this thing, and there were several stages of work on the Step Pyramid. So, you know, the Sphinx is frequently hypothesized as being far older than the rest of the Giza Plateau. And I think that's probably pretty plausible. It seems likely. Robert Schoch makes some really good arguments. But then you have the Step Pyramid, which was the first of the pyramids, and it's built upon older structures. There was already a mastaba there. There was already very likely the underground work there, at least to some degree. So underneath this pyramid is this massive shaft, this huge, huge square shaft going down. There used to be wooden rods. You can see holes in the wall of this shaft where, wooden beams used to be. As far as I know, no wood was ever recovered from this place. It's just too old. And then at the bottom of this huge shaft that goes down really, really deep, I think it's like 170 feet or something like that, maybe even 170 meters. It's big, fellas. Go look up footage of this on YouTube. Go find people walking around this place. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. It's nothing like any of the other pyramids, and it gets like the least amount of attention. So in the bottom of this huge, huge shaft that this pyramid is sitting on is this huge, huge granite box, like way bigger than the Serapeum boxes. This huge white granite box. And then there are miles of tunnels underneath this pyramid running around in different, miles of tunnels under this pyramid. And this is where these vases were found. And you'll see the number 40,000, right? So 40 plus thousand of these vases were found. Well, there's a nice caveat that needs to be taken with that number. So I'm pretty confident that the way that number is calculated is you can find Ben from Uncharted X. He's got some good footage of these tunnels where he's walking around in these tunnels, stepping over these piles of these ancient vases still piled on the ground in these tunnels where many of them still remain today. So, you can see him stepping over these piles of vases. And if you have a vase and it's broken into 10 pieces, that's counted as 10 pieces. So that number of 40,000 plus, for one, is an estimate. And two, it's calculating all of those fragments as a piece. So I have no idea how many of these vases there truly are or truly were, because so many of them have been broken now. But probably at least a few thousand. Like, even if you're assuming these were broken into 10, 20 pieces each, you're still dealing with a few thousand of these vases minimum. And that's just what has been found in this one location, because the vast majority of these super impressive pre-dynastic vases have been found in this one location, either in the tunnels directly under the step pyramid or in tunnels, immediately surrounding the step pyramid. And this is a good case for inheritance. We have no idea how old these vases truly are. We think we know when Djoser, the guy who allegedly built the step pyramid, he's about 4,500 years ago. He was first of the fourth dynasty, I believe. And so we know that they're at least 4,500 years old. But we're also pretty confident that Djoser did not make all of these vases himself. He found these vases. One, his name's not written all over them, which, take that as you will. They really like to write their names on things, especially if you listen to, the alternate historians like Ben. They loved writing their names. They lived for writing their names on things. No names on these vases, okay? The sheer volume of them, and then just the anomalous nature of them. Like, if Djoser was doing this, where's all of the other stuff that Djoser was doing of similar quality? And there are, there's the triads of Menkaure and stuff. Those are really impressive statues. So there are other impressive objects from this time period, but the vases still seem anomalous, especially when, same dynasty, just a few rulers later, they are touting these alabaster vases, as like that's like the pinnacle of their achievement. They're like, these are status symbols, these alabaster vases just a few generations later, that are significantly lower quality and are, the hardness of chalk versus the hardness of granite. So these were inherited. These vases were inherited. From when were they inherited is the question. And a lot of people like to jump to 12,000 years ago. I'm more conservative. I think maybe 6,000 years ago, right? But I've had conversations about the vases with science believers several times, and the conversations always go the exact same way. First they start with denial, but once you get them past the denial phase, assuming you can get them past the denial phase where they actually acknowledge that the vases are legitimate, the measurements are legitimate, they're forced to then, okay, there are these incredibly anomalous objects that we've found and are studying. And then they go, well, so what? So what's the big deal? What does that even matter? I thought these vases were rewriting history. And what, you're just saying that the lathe was invented a few thousand years earlier than we had given them credit for inventing it? Like, big deal. That changes nothing. Okay. First of all, if that's all it was, that would still be a very big deal. If all this proved was that the lathe was invented a few thousand years earlier, before dynastic Egypt even existed, that would be a massive, massive deal. But these vases indicate and implicate so much more than that. They implicate so much more than that. So I've made this argument that the level of precision you're seeing in these vases is simply impossible given the level of technology that is ascribed to the pre-dynastic and even dynastic Egyptians. The methods that you see scientists against myths using, which I love scientists against myths, they're invaluable. I think they are doing the actual work, right? When it comes to doing the work, they are the very few that are legitimately doing the work. They're putting in the work in to prove and disprove these theories. I don't think they're spot on with everything that they think, but what they are doing is absolutely invaluable. Okay? And you can look at the techniques that they're suggesting. You can look at the wooden jibs that they've got set up and everything. It is absolute, and they're making impressive pieces out of this. They're making really surprisingly impressive pieces out of this. But it is absolutely impossible to achieve the level of precision that we're seeing in these vases with those types of setups. It's just not possible. It's a material science issue. It's not a skin. It's absolutely impossible with hand tools as well. It does not matter how skilled of a craftsman you are. You cannot, and especially not repeatedly, which there's tens of thousands of these vases, right? You cannot achieve those levels of precision with those levels of consistency. It's just not possible. It is just absolutely impossible. Okay, so they had the lathe. No, this indicates a good deal more than just a simple lathe. You could make a lathe out of wood. The scientists against myths are essentially making a lathe-like machine. It's not exactly a lathe, but it's lathe-like. It's also made out of wood and stones, and it's just not going to give you the results of these vases. Not even close. So I've recommended ClickSpring's videos so many times, I'll recommend them again. Watch ClickSpring's videos on the Antikythera mechanism. Specifically, watch his videos where he's making the tools. He's got a playlist where he's making the tools using techniques that would have been available to the ancient Greeks. And he gets to a point where he's using brass and bronze tools, and he can't progress through the project because the material limitations of brass. He cannot make things precise enough due to the material limitations of brass. So he starts using iron, and he uses brass to make this iron lathe, and then he continues using these simple tools to improve this other tool so that he can continue making better tools. And it's this progress of, making a tool to make a better tool, to make a better tool, to make a better tool, right? And that's what ClickSpring is doing. And that's what was being done 5,000 plus years ago in ancient Egypt. Okay, again, you have to understand the material limitations. There are real material limitations that just will, it doesn't matter how good you are, how careful you are, you cannot create those types of tolerances, those levels of precision with inferior materials. It's just not possible. I'm going to let my dog out real quick. He's shaking and whining at me. Right back. Okay. So the argument I'm making here is that not only were they creating lathes and like very precise, very relatively advanced, like I'm saying advanced lathes, and I want to be careful with this language here because like you can go look at ClickSpring's lathe. Would you describe ClickSpring's lathe as an advanced lathe? No, it's really, really freaking simple, but it's also employing that idea of progressive tool, progression, which is not simple. It is advanced. So it's like, whatever. I don't want to get stuck in the weeds here, but they clearly were producing advanced toolery as well as having advanced material science. Like they almost certainly had to have iron, if not steel, for this. They definitely were using copper and brass, right? Bronze. This is way before that was supposed to be being used. This is supposed to be done with bone and wood and stone tools. Not happening. It is not happening. It's absolutely not happening. So the argument I'm making here is that there wasn't an industrialized civilization before dynastic Egypt, okay? They clearly had someone who was born with an inherent understanding of engineering. I'm a smart guy. I could learn engineering. You could teach me how to think like an engineer, and I could do it. But that's not something that I was born with. That's not innate within me. I don't just look at things and think of them, like an engineer would. Like when I watch ClickSpring's videos, his videos blow my mind. I can understand it while I'm watching it. Like I said, I could be taught to think like an engineer, but it's not something inherent within me. So to have that mindset where you're not taught it, you're just inherently understanding this engineer's mindset. You're inherently understanding and seeing this progression. You're able to just, because I'm able to do this with other things, right? But you're able to see the progression. You're able to just see in your head the line from one tool to the next, and able to build upon these things. That's industrialization. That's the Industrial Revolution, what I'm describing. That's what led us to the Industrial Revolution. That's what's required for these vases. And they obviously did achieve this. You have tens of thousands of these vases. These are not just skilled craftsmen putting together these vases. I mean, I'm sure they were skilled craftsmen, but the point I'm making is that they had industrialized this process. They had tools that were very, good at doing their job to make these vases. I'm going to read through the chat a little bit. But yeah, no, this was an industrialized civilization. And if they were doing this, if they were able to apply these principles of engineering, of progressive progress, whatever, better words to be used there, but whatever. If they were applying that to these vases, like, do you really think that's the only thing they're applying? If you've got someone with a mind like that, they're able to figure all of this out. They're making lathes, they're advancing material sciences, because there's limits of material science that are very, very relevant here, very important here, cannot be ignored here, cannot be overlooked here. And then there's also the technology itself, the machinery itself. Both are equally important. Both are required. Both are requirements for these vases. So whether it was one guy or two different guys, one who understood the material science and one who understood the engineering, and they both worked together, I don't know. But you have an unbelievable level of genius, assuming that this is springing up from nothing, assuming that this is coming from, at some point someone did have to invent this for the first time ever, right? So at some point someone's doing this, because this all could be some type of inheritance. This all could be remnants from a 12,000-year-old civilization that they just found these vases 12,000 or 6,000 years later. They could have found some technology that gave them a head start with these vases or something. But at some point, someone had to invent this stuff. At some point, you're having just this unparalleled genius, these titans of inherent knowledge. I think these people are born understanding this thing. I really think that happens occasionally, is you just get people who like imagine trying to figure out chemistry for the first time ever. Like some kind of really retarded special genius had to be born to break through chemistry, but yeah, the material sciences, the engineering, both are essential. Both have to come about at the same time simultaneously. I guess you could develop one first and then the other, but like both have to be present at the same time. And none of this existed. None of this existed according to the mainstream. Everything I'm saying is absolutely ridiculous to suggest that any of this could have been possible 5,000+ years ago. But these vases absolutely demand this. We are talking about an industrial civilization making these vases. This is an industrialized process making these vases. And yes, this is what Ben argues, and I criticize Ben a decent amount, but I also have said, I really, really, his work on the vases is invaluable. But it truly is go watch, if you haven't watched them already, watch Click Spring's videos where he's making the tools for the Antikythera mechanism. Watch him explain how he's running into these material science issues where there are material limitations. He just can't create precise enough components for this Antikythera mechanism using brass and bronze exclusively. He had to switch to iron. He had to because of the... And then look at the tolerances on these vases. You're dealing with a much harder material with granite, and the tolerances are so extreme. You not only have to have the engineering, you also have to have the material science. This was not done with bone and stone. This was like steel. Maybe just iron, but probably beyond bronze. I really, really think this is most likely beyond bronze. We're really, really stretching the limits of bronze with this one. I think this was probably iron. I don't know Monica Perez, but I might check that out. Mark's cool. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. Usually this stuff is in my feed, so I just kind of see it. I don't even actively look for this stuff anymore, so I'm usually up to date on it, but obviously this one slipped my radar. I don't know enough. I don't think we know enough, right? There's speculation on that kind of stuff, but yeah, he built 2 or 3. Djoser built a couple pyramids, and the step pyramid was one of the ones that Djoser built. And I don't know, there's a whole bunch of other stuff, carbon dating in Egypt I can launch into. If anyone wants to call in, feel free to call in, fellas. Good time to call in while I read chat. Not entirely sure what you're talking about there, Mr. Laser. I'm not sure if you're talking about like the Casey tunnels and stuff like that. One of the things I did kind of want to talk about tonight, though, is the idea of the underground work at Egypt. So, like I said, there's miles of tunnels underneath the bent pyramid. How many of you, raise of hands, how many of you knew that? How many of you were aware that there were miles of tunnels underneath the bent pyramid? the step pyramid. Sorry, the step pyramid, not the bent pyramid. How many of you knew that? There is a ridiculous amount of underground work in Giza. There's tunnels all over the place, and many of the I'm sure there's plenty still to be explored and excavated and discovered, but many have been discovered and explored and documented, and then they're just not talked about. You just don't hear about them. You just don't see about them. They're not open to tourism. They get completely overlooked, and to some extent, I understand this. Like, there's this one tunnel. I think it's like 1.5 miles long. It's just a giant U shape. There's allegedly nothing connected to this. There's nothing else to it. It's just this giant U that's like 1.5 miles long. It's all perfectly coated and perfectly polished, Chura limestone, floor, ceiling, walls, right? Perfectly polished, perfectly smooth, just like a hermetic chamber underground for 1.5 miles in this U shape. So when you have all of these other features on the Giza Plateau, like, why are you going to go crawl underground and just walk this long blank tunnel? You're not. It's not going to be your number one tourist destination. So to an extent, I understand why this stuff gets overlooked. But there's the Digital Giza project where they're mapping Giza out. And I remember years ago a channel, Ancient Architects, I'm pretty sure it was, talking about this U-shaped tunnel, right, and showing it on the Digital Giza platform. And so I went recently to the Digital Giza platform and I tried looking at, for underground structures, and I was having a difficult time. And maybe that was, this was a little while ago, so I don't even remember the details, but I do remember I wasn't able to really find anything underground. Maybe I need to take another look. I don't know. It is really difficult to find information about the underground works at Giza. There's a ton, though. There's a ton of them. A lot. There's that new L-shaped, void that they're looking into now, but, like, that's insignificant in the grand scheme of things. There's a lot going on underground at Giza. Huge shaft, dude. Seriously, if you haven't seen the huge shaft and the tunnels that are underneath the step pyramid, go look that up. It's way more impressive than the rest of the pyramids, quite frankly. It's way older. I don't know if I've finished making this point, but like the Sphinx, which is quite possibly actually 12,000 plus years old, some of the features of the step pyramid could date back to those earliest, Sphinx times. Whenever the Sphinx was, this step pyramid could also be a part of that, I really think. And then I guess these vases as well, right? Could have been aliens, but why? Yeah, lathe is a big deal, and this is beyond just a simple lathe. This is beyond just a simple lathe would be a big deal. This is so much more than that. But yeah, that would be a huge deal. Pre-dynastic Egyptians having the lathe. Oh, what? I thought these vases were like a big deal. That's been the response I've gotten every single time. Every single time I've engaged one of these science believers on the vases is, oh, what? It's just a lathe a few thousand years early. No, nothing significant there. What's up, man?
Yo, what's up? Can you see me?
Yeah, we got you.
Oh shit, it's the first time I've ever done this. Is there an echo or anything?
Yeah, that's me I hear in the background. I can't hear myself in the background, yes.
Is it obnoxious? But I don't know how to.
It wasn't obnoxious, but I think you fixed it now. It sounds, yeah, I don't hear myself.
Yeah, I turned it down a little. That's all I can do. Yeah, about the vases. The only thing is, I think they did have a way to cut things that were harder than the materials they had to work with. Apparently, as they put stuff like quartz sand between as a in between, and it would grind it. So I was talking to this chemistry guy, and he was saying basically they use steel tools to cut things that are harder than steel by basically putting diamond
abrasive, yeah.
Yeah, so that's my understanding of one way they could have done it.
And they definitely were doing that. I don't know if that explains everything. Like, I think there's quite possibly still some lost techniques to us. You know, you look at some of the weird stone structures you see in like Peru that have, you know, vitrified surfaces and stuff where it's not just polished, but the surface of the granite is actually melted. Things like that. Like, that's not explained by abrasives, right? So could something like that have been being used in Egypt as well? Quite possibly. So they definitely were using that technique. I don't know if that's exclusively what they were using. Is there something else? I'm open to other ideas as well. But yes, they were doing that for sure.
Yeah, and apparently there's another way to you can lower like the melting point of granite by I guess putting it under, I think it was like 100 megapascals of pressure. I have no idea what that means. So, um, but it lowers it from something like 1200 Celsius to like 600. And you do that, and you add water, and I don't know what that means or how they would have implemented it, but that is a way to at least lower the melting point. So if they lathed it under pressure somehow, that's another way they could have done it. Um, but even if they did all this, you still have that area around the handles, right? The area around the handle was you can't lathe that.
Right.
So
yeah, still a mystery even when we account for things like lathes. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was something about I guess when they measured the perfection of the vase, they left out maybe that area, you know, the bend, you know,
Right.
And they gave a margin of error or whatever, or a certain percent of the vase that was not within that perfection. So that was something like 4% of the vase, which I guess that's kind of a lot to leave out. It doesn't sound like a lot to us, but so it's usually like way less, like less than 1%, and they left that out, and that was probably, I guess, the area right around the handles. So
right.
I think the ancient probably they did that, but they made it look like super close to the rest. You can't even tell with your eye, right? You need like fine precision instruments to
right. And what you just described is actually a really good example of what I'm trying to highlight. Is so like you're saying, you can't, if you look at the vases visually, it looks perfect even around the handle areas. It looks like a perfect sphere everywhere on the vase, including where those handles are. But you're right that when they're doing like the laser scans around those areas, there is a higher degree of error than the rest of the vase. And so, you know, with the rest of the vase, that level of precision that's achieved is well beyond what a craftsman can achieve with a hand tool, right? So there's clearly technology and lathing going into those. And then around the handles, what you might be seeing is the ability of an absolute master craftsman getting those, you know, perfect within what an eyeball can see, right? But then when you actually laser scan it, you're seeing that they have introduced you know, variabilities and errors, but it's still again, master craftsman, it's perfect as far as an eye can tell, but you know, it's no longer less than the width of a human hair around those areas. And so that's like the difference of perfection of a really skilled craftsman and this machinery. And I think you can see both of those examples on these vases.
Right. You know, and weren't the granite ones were older than the all the newer stuff wasn't made out of granite, right? The oldest stuff was made out of granite, and then the newer stuff wasn't.
So there's dynastic Egyptian attempts of recreating this style with pottery. So they would make pottery and then they would paint it to look like granite. But yeah, all of these super impressive granite vases are all 4.5+ thousand years old.
And it's like, why does it shouldn't work that way, right? Technology should be improving.
Not with the progression of, you know, the mainstream narrative, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's pretty much all I had to say. And then I think a lot of things that they knew a lot more, and it seems like they knew how to build ships, they knew how to do ocean faring, and I think kind of this playing dumb, you know, like treating them like they're dumb is kind of, it seems to kind of steer us away from that a bit.
Yeah. And that's a theme that you find throughout every period of history in every part of the world. Is that like I said, I think people were generally much more intelligent and more advanced than they've been given credit for in, you know, across all of history.
Right on, man.
Yeah. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it, man. Yeah. So, yeah. If anyone else wants to call in, feel free. I'm going to continue reading through the chat here, trying to see what I missed here. Yeah, they are science maniacs. It's really crazy. It's just like the thing that gets me the most is that they really believe themselves to be like intellectually superior, and I'm not saying like smarter, but like more intellectually honest. Like they hold the moral high ground of in intellect, right? They're the ones doing the real science, you know. They're the ones with integrity and everything. And then just so quickly how that's all dismissed. Oh, what's the lay the few extra thousand? That's not even a big deal. That doesn't even matter. Whatever. You know? Um, yeah, I don't know why we've lost it, but we definitely have lost a lot of evidence. Like there's so much we're missing. Yeah, and I don't think I'm going to get into it now, and this isn't the main point, so I can talk about it a little bit. Next week probably I'll talk about nubs. And I do think that the nubs likely were there for attaching facades. Like you attach a wooden facade via the nubs to these stone things. I don't know. I don't actually know, but I have some interesting things to point out with the nubs. I don't actually know what they're for, but that's a thought that I've entertained several times. Is that, you know, they're there for like attaching facades, wooden facades, to these structures. Yeah, there's Tutankhamun, I believe. Um, Tutankhamun's dagger was iron, and there were a couple. I want to say there were like 2 or 3 meteoric iron daggers that were discovered in ancient Egypt. But yeah, and I recently saw something that was steel, straight up steel, not even iron and not meteoric, but straight up steel that was older than Tutankhamun's dagger. And I don't remember the details whatsoever off the top of my head, but there was some old steel that was found thousands of years old recently. I had just seen. I'll try and find that for next week, see if I can find it. But yeah, the oldest iron was thought to be meteoric. We've found some examples older. That's very cool, Mr. Morin. Did it support you? Clickspring does roll. Hey, look, Mr. Laser confirming me. Yeah, his sandals are fun. The sandals are fun. Yeah, I am quite confident that steam engines have been invented many times, and that was not even the first. Um, again, just the theme of we were far more advanced across history than we've been given credit for, especially when you start looking at like the writings and the thoughts of the Greeks and the Romans in the way that they were trying to recover the greatness of their predecessors. Like, yeah, man, nah. And then you look at things like the Antikythera mechanism. Like, get real, you silly little goobers. Come on, dude. We had steam engines and all that shit. Of course we did. Like, get real. Get real. Seriously. I'm joking around a little bit, but I'm really not joking around. Like, go read the greatest minds from Greece and from Rome and about how they were all trying to recover the greatness of their past. Go read about the inventions that they claimed existed, the talking heads, the Antikythera mechanism, everything else that was just too grand to possibly exist until we found it with the Antikythera mechanism. And then only that actually made it through the test of time because we didn't know what it was for 100 years, and it was on a shelf for 100 years, acknowledged, and then they went, oh shit, this is crazy stuff. Let me open up StreamYard. So yeah, I genuinely do believe that Greece had steam engines and stuff like that. Like I know that's a bold claim in that it's pretty far removed from what the mainstream history is, but when you look at the information that's available, when you actually look at the information that's available, you look at the Antikythera mechanism, you look at all this stuff. Yeah, I don't think it's a leap at all. Screw it. I'm not even gonna set this up again. That's it. That's the show, fellas. I hope you enjoyed it. That's the show. I'll finish reading through chat here real quick and then I'm out. Swedenborg. I don't know if I'm familiar with Swedenborg, but sounds kind of interesting. Yeah, you can, but hey, at least one person knew about the tunnels. No one else raised their hand, so I'm going to assume that you're the only person who knew, Mr. Slav, which is kind of crazy, right? All of you guys are obviously interested in this topic and you don't even know about that. It's like the point is not the tunnels. The point is that everywhere is like that. Like there's so much that you just have never heard of that. I've never heard of that. We've all never heard of. That's impressive and it's out there and it's real and it's known, but yeah, I had a lot more to talk about. I'll be talking about it next week because I've got more rants to rant about. I've got more rants, fellas. I've got more rants, but we're gonna save them for next week. Yeah, it was a lot more than just like you can't just dismiss it at even just waving your hand and going, well, they've invented the lathe, big deal. That's already insane. But then yes, it was more than just a lathe. Yeah, there's things like natron. There's all this stuff. I have no idea what was used, but I think it's more likely than not that other techniques beyond just copper and abrasives were being used. Yeah, I'll talk about it next week. I'll talk about the nubs next week. There's issues with the nubs. There's a lot of issues with the nubs. I've heard about a lot of these robots. I'm not familiar with the pigeon. I'm going to look that up immediately after I sign off. I'm going to look that up, Argonian. That sounds very, very cool. I don't think I know about the pigeon. All right, that's the stream. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. Peace out. Catch you next week. I wasn't even recording. Okay.